Welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast, your source for all things bourbon. Join your hosts, Mark and Matt, as they drink and review bourbons, share news about upcoming events, interview the who's who in the bourbon world, and, most importantly, bring you along for the fun of living the bourbon life. Now, here's your hosts, Mark and Matt.
All right, everybody, welcome back for another episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, as always, is my good friend, my buddy, still sporting that 1970s porn star mustache, Matt. Matt, what's going on tonight, man? How you doing?
Oh, Mark, so we are recording on the last day of November, and I gave you until today. I was going to shave it off because I've finally been released from my quarantine. It was supposed to be the quarantine mustache, but I'll give you till the end of the month. So I'm doing well, and tomorrow when I finally get rid of this terrible excuse for a dusting of a mustache, I'll be doing even better. But I'm doing well, Mark. How are you?
Here's what I'm hoping that you're going to do. I'm hoping you're going to shave it off in little sections and then like glue it onto a little piece of paper and then put it in a frame of some form and just frame it and keep it forever as your quarantine, your COVID mustache. Man.
It'll be like, everybody's got a baby book and they have their first tooth that they ever lost. This is like my first mustache that I've ever been able to somewhat grow. So this is a monumental thing for me.
Yeah. Well, man, I'm happy we're back together again over here. We've been separated for a few weeks. Matt was in quarantine and now things are good. Everything's back to normal. So Matt's here with me. Fortunately, he is wearing pants tonight since it's so cold outside. So we're all good with that. But before we jump into everything, because we've got a really big show, we got a lot of things we're going to work through tonight, which is going to be pretty exciting. But before we do that, I want to thank our sponsor, the Stave Restaurant out in Millville, Kentucky. They're making some great food out there. Chef Jonathan Sanning, a wonderful chef, great guy. Just makes some wonderful food. Kentucky elevated cuisine is what they call it. They're out there on the banks of Glen Creek, located between Woodford Reserve and Castle and Key Distillery out there in Millville, Kentucky on McCracken Pike. So if you get a chance to go check them out, Rebecca and Eric Burnworth that own it, just are wonderful people. We really appreciate their support. They've been with us since the very beginning of this, and we appreciate them. And now that everybody's still in lockdown, it's the time that we want to ask everybody to support them back. So if you guys get a chance, check out the Stave Restaurant. You can visit them online at thestavekentucky.com. So with that said, Matt, tell everybody who we have with us tonight.
Absolutely. This is a show that I have had bookmarked on my calendar for quite a while that I've been looking forward to. So we're going to get right down to it. We have joining with us tonight on the Bourbon Life Podcast, Andy Mansinne and David Whitmer of MGP in Lawrenceville, Indiana. Gentlemen, welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast.
Hey, guys.
Hello.
Hey. Well, man, we appreciate you guys being with us on this cold, snowy, well, at least for us over here in Lexington, it's cold and snowy, but we appreciate you guys spending time with us. We know it's a late day and it is a Monday. So you guys, I'm sure, have had a long day already. So we'll try to make this as painless as possible for you guys and get through it. But I tell you what, if you want to, because I know we got several things to drink through. So we got the first one poured up. Matt and I have a bad habit of forgetting to introduce our drink first, and then we jump right into all the discussion. So if you guys want to, if one of you would like to just tell us, what we're going to drink this first drink, that'd be great.
Sure. This is David. I'm David Whitmer. I'm master blender with MGP. And the first thing we're going to do is our 8 and Sand blended bourbon whiskey.
Great.
And this is at 88 proof. And we'll try it, and we'll talk about it.
So I know that there's a story behind the name 8 and Sand. While we're all sort of sitting here going through the nose and starting to taste it a little bit, can you tell us a little bit about the story behind it?
I can.
Sure. You want to do it, Dave?
Sure. So that was Andy, by the way. And so 8 and Sand is an old railroad term. So 8 was the highest position on the locomotive's throttle. And then, of course, you use sand between the wheels and the rail to gain traction. And somewhere across time, don't know when, it became an expression for smooth sailing or good luck. So 8 and Sand is that expression of smooth sailing. And we certainly like this 8 and Sand as a very smooth blended bourbon whiskey. Now, we can get into how it tastes in just a minute, but I need to make sure everybody understands what we're talking about when we're talking about a blended bourbon whiskey.
Sure.
We often see blended whiskeys, and sometimes blended whiskeys kind of have this negative connotation because you turn on, look at the back of the label, and you'll see that there is somewhere between 60 and 80% grain neutral spirits, which is vodka, or there's caramel coloring and things like that. Our 8 and Sand doesn't have any of that.
Okay.
And because it's majority bourbon, it can be called a blended bourbon whiskey.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So what all goes into the 8 and Sand? So you got the bourbon whiskey, obviously, and
Yep.
then what
We
other?
have bourbon, our rye whiskey,
Okay.
corn whiskey, and light whiskey.
Okay.
So it's a way to highlight and showcase all the different kinds of whiskey that we make at our Lawrenceburg, Indiana distillery. Put them all together in a very flavorful fashion. It's great to sip. Certainly great for cocktails. Great if somebody just has to take whiskey and put it with Coke or whatever. And
Sure.
so it's just really good for that. But it is majority bourbon, so it's not going to be very far away if you're just a traditional bourbon drinker and
Sure.
then try the 8 and Sand.
So Matt, you've had a chance now to give it a nose and a taste. What are you picking up on this one?
I get a lot of vanilla on the nose, a lot of vanilla and caramel, and the oak is coming across. A little bit of corn, but not too much. And then on the palate, I'm picking up a lot of the rye that's going into it. It's got that really nice rye spice at the end. And again, it's got a nice sweetness, nice caramel notes. I taste the vanilla again on the palate and a little bit of a nutty flavor, a roasted nut. But I really like the way the rye is coming through with this. It adds a nice little punch on the end that I think for 88 proof, it kind of gives it some legs, gives it a little kick.
Yeah. And so the bourbon is MGP signature high rye bourbon.
Okay.
So there's a bourbon that would be 75% corn, 21% rye, and 4% barley malt, and then 60% corn, 36% rye, and 4% barley malt. So those two bourbons in there have a lot of rye, and then our 95% rye, it's 95% rye and 5% barley malt. There's some of that in there too.
Yeah. So Matt's a big high rye fan. So I assumed that this one would kind of be in his wheelhouse, and I'm not surprised that he liked it. But I agree, Matt. It's got a nice nose on it, very sweet. And then it's got the first initial taste was that sweetness as well. Obviously there's a lot of corn in it, but then like you said, that rye spice does shine through. It's not like a kick you in the teeth kind of spiciness that comes through and says, "Hey, I'm here," and knocks your door down. It just kind of sneaks up on you a little bit, and I like that. And it finishes really well too. And I noticed that it's clinging in the glass. So your stuff is non-chill filtered too, right? So
that's correct.
Right. All of our whiskeys are non-chill filtered.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I was thinking. That was the case. So that's always nice. But so what about you guys? I mean, what in terms of your nosing and your tasting? Since you guys, this is your stuff. You want to share with us what you get on it?
Well, I think Matt could write copy for us. I mean, he gave a great description. I loved it. And here in a minute, we're going to try our George Remus bourbon, which is a combination of those same high rye bourbons that we just talked about. And so it's going to be very reminiscent. It's going to be a little higher proof. But there's another part of this 8 and Sand that really helps round it out, makes it very smooth and appealing. And that's really two things that people don't know that I find that people don't know that much about. And that's corn whiskey and light whiskey.
Sure.
Both of those are put in used cooperage. So a former bourbon barrel, a former rye barrel will put corn whiskey or light whiskey. And the corn whiskey, just as it's stated, has a lot of corn in it. And you distill both of those at a little higher proof than you would bourbon or rye whiskey. And because they're in used cooperage, you're going to let them age, 7, 8, sometimes even 9 years. And they were developed, particularly the light whiskey, by the previous owners of our Lawrenceburg, Indiana distillery, and that would be Seagram's.
Okay.
Seagram's actually came up with the process of petitioning the TTB or the government to have the category of light whiskey. And they did that because, one, they had a lot of used barrels, and two, different experiments they did with those used barrels and storing product in it. It's no different than when we ship our barrels over and they make Scotch or Irish whiskey out of it, that there's still flavor in that barrel. You just need to be patient and wait a little longer for it. And it's a typical kind of mixer blender that are used, again, in a lot of different blended whiskeys. And we wanted to really highlight it and showcase it so that people can understand the overall smoothness. So you put that with the bourbon and the high rye bourbon and then the rye whiskey. And then you were both kind of talked about how it had a little bit of that kick, but it didn't like trump all over you. And that's because that light whiskey and that corn whiskey are kind of help rounding that out.
Yeah,
that certainly helps with the sweetness as well. And when we're talking to a younger, maybe an early entry whiskey drinking consumer, they've moved from really sweet craft beer and sweet cocktails to when they want to get serious about whiskey. This is a good transition whiskey, I think, for younger palates. And because that sweetness still holds up, and yet you get the complexity that David's been talking about with both the high rye bourbon and the rye. I would just tell you all one little kind of side note here. We created 8 and Sand really as to honor our hometown of Atchison, Kansas. That's where MGP is headquartered. While all of our whiskeys are distilled and aged in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, our white goods, our gins and our vodkas are distilled in our Atchison, Kansas distillery. And Atchison was one of the founding cities of the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad. So we really created this brand as a thank you and a way to give back to the community.
Very nice. Now I feel the urge to break into a little Johnny Mercer and kick off a little Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe.
Yeah.
Just a little.
Yeah.
I won't subject anybody to my singing though, but yeah, that's really cool, paying homage to the rail line and the people that are involved with that. And the label's really cool as well. I really like the is that an 801? Is that
Yeah, that locomotive is actually sitting in the Atchison Railroad Museum.
Is it really?
That was the workhorse of the late 19th century.
Very nice.
And, so that locomotive sits about 3 blocks from the Atchison distillery.
Okay. All right. Great. And you mentioned that you guys do the clear liquids as well. You've got gin, and you guys do. You're like, did I see somewhere that you are the largest distiller of gin in the U.S.? Is that right?
We're the largest North American distiller of gin. Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
I happen to be the largest rye distiller as well, among other things.
Yeah. And that's, it's funny because I guess, when you're looking at MGP and you do research on it, and you look on the internet, you see all these stories. It's like the largest distillery you've probably never heard of, or you may have never heard of, you're not familiar with. And, it's funny because Matt and I obviously have a love of bourbon and rye. So, to us, we know what MGP means when we're talking about a bourbon and rye. But, there are people out there that probably don't. I mean, that's just the way. It seems like that's kind of been that was the business model. I think it seems like to me. Is that correct? I mean, is that accurate?
It was the business model until 4 years ago. And what really created the move, what I would call a physical move to our own brands was, I think the company was very happy distilling for a lot of multinationals and certainly this fast emerging craft industry. But as you see a lot of your partners and customers, exiting for hundreds of millions of dollars, the board sort of said, hey, how are we going to capture this value share, right? And so the MGP Brands organization was started. We launched our very first shipment, Till Vodka and George Remus Bourbon on June 15th of 2017. So It's been 3.5 years, and we're going to talk through most of our portfolio tonight. So in a very short time, we've created a portfolio. Yes, we're biased because we have a lot of great barrels and a lot of great product that we can work with. Yeah. But we've been we've gone from 0 to 60 in 3 years. We're in 16 markets currently right now, and looking to expand more rapidly next year. But we're having a lot of fun.
Well, to me, that seems like, I know it's a business, and I know you guys are a publicly traded company, so you have shareholders and things you have to answer to, but there's got to be a level of fun and excitement in doing it. And I think you got to hold true to that. And you guys seem to be doing a lot of really cool stuff. And like this 8 and Sand. Now this is new, right? This is from last year, or was that the first year?
Yeah, we launched really January of 2019.
Okay.
And we rolled it out to our 16 markets and have had a lot of success with it. I mean, the way we've priced it, it's really a great product on premise. Bars and restaurants can afford to use it in their cocktails. We had one account in Denver, and this is certainly pre-COVID, but they had it as a premix, they had it as a feature, they had it as a shot. I mean, they just went wild for 8 and Sand. I mean, it was a lot of fun. So.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, to me, it drinks, because I usually like a higher proof bourbon or rye. Mm-hmm. And I know this is 88 proof. To me, it does drink, and it may be the rye spiciness on the end of it. It drinks a little bit hotter than an 88 proof. But like you said, I think this would be a good way, not necessarily that it is a bourbon, but like you said, someone who's coming into the whiskey world and trying to understand and get a better feeling for it. I think this might be a good place for somebody to start, just to get their feet wet, see what they're definitely. Matt, what do you think?
I agree with you, Mark. I think it's a good place to not just see a starting bourbon that's something so typical of bourbon, because I like the fact that this has that nice rye and it's got some of the different blending characteristics in it, that it's not just typical like heavy corn, very sweet, but it's got that kick. It's got a little bit of punch from that rye, and in different flavors. It's a good place for people to start, because it does have that sweet note on the front, but it's also got some complexity to it, and it's nice to be able to display a bourbon or a blended product in this case that has some of the rye characteristics as well. And I think this would be a good gateway to go down other roads as well, to get involved and start.
It's the gateway. It's the great
start
gateway.
Training the palate.
The gateway. It's a gateway bourbon, right?
Yeah.
There you go. Well, guys, we always like to get some information about who we're talking to. We kind of jumped into everything. But can you guys just take
We're just excited about the whiskey,
I know, it's like I'm ready all day long, because I work from home. I am an attorney. I actually practice law. I still work. But all day I've had these 5 bottles sitting on my desk, and I've just been chomping at the bit, ready to get to these. So yeah, I was just really excited. But can you guys just take a few minutes, or as long as you'd like, just kind of tell everybody a little bit about who you are, how you got into the industry, and we'd like to know that.
So David's pointing at me. He wants me to lead off. That's fine. Well, I've been with the company 4 years, and in fact, I just had my fourth year anniversary right before Thanksgiving. So I have the honor of working with David Whitmer on a daily. He probably feels like an hourly basis, but we have we do everything at MGP on a team basis. We have a team of master blenders, a team of master distillers. Our team is 15 people strong between marketing and sales, and everybody's engaged in how we go to market, how we go to the customer, and how we go to the consumer. And we get very engaged. I'm very honored to really lead a team of multi-year professionals. We've been lucky to bring into the fold people from Brown-Forman and AB InBev and Suntory Beam. I mean, so people with lots and lots and lots of years of experience, and they're very selfless in sharing their experience and their skills as we build this organization. Because really what we're doing with MGP Brands is we're building everything, right? We're building process, we're building systems, we're building a brands, we're building a portfolio, we're building markets, we're building distributor and trade relationships. So every day is something new, and that's what makes it so much fun. As for me, I have spent almost my entire career in beverage alcohol. I finished my MBA 1,000 years ago and was in consumer packaged goods marketing. And I always had the bug of brewing and mostly wine. Dave will tell you about his distilling experience, but I was very passionate about wine. In fact, I was with Brown-Forman for nearly 15 years, running every single wine business that we had, new and old. Had a great time with that. But the opportunity to really help create something new and something exciting at MGP was really it's just too good to pass up. So I've been here since late 2016, and we've been just sort of rolling up our shirt sleeves and building brands and getting everything ready on a daily basis.
Very nice. Now, Andy, are you from Kentucky? Are you from the region here? Or
yeah, well, we've been here 25 years. We've raised our two daughters here in Louisville, and actually, we came here because of Brown-Forman, and we kind of haven't left. My quick background: I'm an Army brat. I grew up. My dad was a career Army officer. We lived literally all over the world. Home for me and the family is right outside Washington, D.C., in Arlington, Virginia, where I finished high school and then was lucky to attend the University of Virginia as an undergrad. And then I thought I was going to be a lawyer, so I worked for a law firm for a couple of years and I realized, no, I don't think so.
No, yeah, so, I don't blame you.
so I went on to business school at Michigan and really have never left the Midwest. Have been in the Midwest my whole career.
Very, very nice. Well, Matt's a Michigan guy. I always have to bring that up when anybody mentions Michigan. He's from Michigan, so
yeah, I'm actually from Ann Arbor. So
what a great town!
Yeah, no kidding.
Zingerman's Deli.
Yep. Every time I go home, that's like first place. I call up mom and dad. Hey, meet me at Zingerman's. I'm not even coming home first.
The stories I can tell you about Zingerman's. Yeah. One bright light when going to graduate school there.
Yeah.
Very nice. David, what about you, Dave? Tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. So I've been with MGP for 15 years. I'm Director of Quality and Alcohol R&D and Innovation, as well as Master Blender. And for a lot of those years, it was all about helping our customers, come up with a really good product. And we still do that. And we are still very passionate about helping other people. And a lot of times we are, whether they're a startup or even a well-established company, we're still their whiskey or their bourbon experts. And so we help them with a lot of things. We also help a lot of people with gin and botanicals and their own unique expression of gin as well. And so there's never a dull moment at MGP. And then, as Andy mentioned a few years ago, when we decided to have our own brands, it's been a lot of fun to take the products that we have and truly make them unique. There's been a lot written and a lot talked about how so many different people can take what appears on the surface to be the same thing from MGP and then make it their own. And we really know it's more than just the same thing. There are we do a lot of different mash bills. We do a lot of different ways we can age things for people. And so there is a lot of variety in that. And I've always loved the variety part of working with MGP as well. And so whether they're a vodka customer, a gin customer, a bourbon rye whiskey customer, or really in the last few years, some of our craft customers and startups and really watch them kind of come into their own with their own brands or their own product and how they integrate what they got from MGP. So work with all of them, and that's great. Andy alluded to the story of when I started distilling. I started distilling at the age of 13. When I was in the 7th grade, I had to come up with a science fair project, and everybody else was making volcanoes and how many peanut M&Ms really don't have peanuts in them and that kind of mess. And I thought, why not make alcohol? And so I grew up. My uncle and my grandfather had a dairy farm, so I was always around grain. My father taught science, and he helped me out with getting the enzymes. I still remember going to the pharmacy and getting all the enzymes we needed and the yeast, and I mashed it all up in our basement, and then I set up a distillation column on our kitchen sink because I had to have the cooling water. My mom thought I was going to blow the house up. I told her not to worry about it. And I distilled this stuff like 5-6 times. I was like one of those terrible labels, 8 times distilled. I just kept doing it and doing it. And I thought it was nice. And so I took it to the science fair, and the judges come around. They're asking me these questions. I got this fermentation thing going. So the CO2 is bubbling into water, and you can see the gas and all that kind of mess. And one of them looks at the other one, and they decided to smell it, which I thought was fine. And then they both took a drink. And I really thought I was going to get in trouble. But they kind of liked it because they went and judged some other kids' projects. And then they came back and took another drink. And I got first place. And so I don't know if it was the best science fair. They just had a good time. I mean, come on, I made moonshine, but they seemed to enjoy themselves. There was a couple of professors from a local college. And so we all had a good time. And that's kind of what solidified it. So I majored in chemistry and biology and got a master's degree in management along the way, and just been having a lot of fun in this industry.
Yeah, that sounds like that's a great story, man. I absolutely love that. That's hilarious.
That was back in a time when you could do stuff like that. Now you'd probably be expelled.
You'd be kicked out of school, no question about that. That's what I was sitting here thinking. I'm like, how in the world were you not expelled for that? But that's awesome.
It was a small school, and it was a long time ago. So.
Oh man. Well, guys, I tell you what, we're actually at the end of our first segment, so let's get some closing thoughts on the 8 and Sand. Before we wrap it up, and then we'll come back for round 2 and we'll move on to other drinks. But Matt, real quick, what are your thoughts on this one? Well, it doesn't have to be real quick, Matt. Take your time. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. The product kind of spoke for itself here. I was really anxious to try it, not knowing anything about what the blend was going to be coming into it, just having heard of it. And I really like it. I really, really do. I like the sweetness that comes through with it that we were talking about. It's got that sweetness on the nose and on the palate. I think it's very inviting, especially maybe as someone who's just getting into the world of oak aged spirits. It's inviting in that realm, but I also like that it's got the sophistication of the rye and some more flavor going on in it as well. So this was one I was very anxious to try. This is my first time trying it, and I'm certainly not disappointed. This is I'm very pleased with this. This is really good.
Yeah, I had finished mine off a few minutes ago, like I always do, but I'm going back into the glass and just having a little after, and I'm picking up these like little notes of leather, and I like almost a little bit of tobacco on it, and it's and which to me, when I think of that, I think of bourbon. So it's just funny that you've got a blend of whiskeys, but it's still, to a bourbon drinker, it still is reminiscent, of drinking a bourbon. So it's not something that's off the wall or out there that a bourbon drinker is going to say that doesn't taste anything like a bourbon to me. I mean, because it does. So yeah, I definitely enjoy this one as well. So I'll tell you what, we'll wrap this session up. We'll take a break, get a word from our sponsor, and we'll come right back in just a second with more with Andy Mansinne and David Whitmer from MGP. So everybody just sit tight and we'll be right back. Thanks.
Hey, Bourbon Lifers. When you're out hunting for those hard-to-find bottles or just enjoying the distilleries of Central Kentucky, you're going to work up an appetite. And when it's time to refuel, we suggest that you visit our good friends Rebecca and Eric Burnworth at the Stave Restaurant. Located at 5711 McCracken Pike in Millville, Kentucky, close to Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve, the Stave Restaurant is just off the beaten path, nestled on the banks of Glens Creek. Chef Jonathan Sanning prepares amazing food each day featuring an elevated Kentucky-inspired cuisine. You can take our word for it, the food alone is worth the trip to the Stave. With a full-service bar, great bourbon flights, and signature cocktails, the Stave is the perfect place to catch up with friends after a fun-filled day of touring the local distilleries. And you can even purchase bottles of bourbon to take home with you while you're there. Make sure to follow the Stave on Instagram and Facebook at The Stave Kentucky, or visit them online at thestavekentucky.com to stay up to date on everything that's going on. The Stave Restaurant is a bourbon lover's paradise, right here in the heart of bourbon country.
All right, everybody, welcome back for round and or session 2, whichever you prefer to call it, of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, as always, is my good friend, my buddy. I'm so sad you're going to shave that mustache off tonight, though, dude. I don't know what I'm going to do next week, Matt, but how you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. It sounded like you kind of almost slurred it in there and wanted to call it a mustache, and it is. It's just a dirty mess up here. So I'm doing well. Again, I'll be doing better once I get this thing off my upper lip. But we've got a full docket to get through tonight. So let's not waste any more time here. We're going to get right back into it with Andy Mansinne and David Whitmer of MGP. And we have got poured up for session number 2, George Remus. We've got a couple different offerings. Guys, you want to tell us what we've got started here?
Sure. So George Remus is our straight bourbon whiskey, and it is a combination of our high rye bourbon mash bills. And so we talked a little bit about 8 and Sand before, about being a combination of several things, including bourbons. And this bourbon, while a lot of people know MGP or they'll know of a particular product that comes from MGP, for the most part, they are a singular mash bill. People buy one mash bill from us. They figure out what they want to, what proof they want to bottle that at, and that's fine. And we wanted to combine our high rye bourbon mash bills really to add complexity. One of the jobs of a master blender is that 1 + 1 must equal 3, which is just a way of saying, the sum has to be greater than the parts. And so you do that because with multiple mash bills, you add complexity. And for example, with this George Remus straight bourbon whiskey, it's a combination of the 2 mash bills, one being 75% corn, 21% rye, 4% barley malt, 60% corn, 36% rye, 4% barley malt. And so there's a lot of corn in one, a lot of rye in the other. And not that they physically layer in the bottle or layer in the glass, but those different mash bills, with each sip, you can experience a different profile. You can get a lot more sweetness from the corn or a lot more rye from the higher rye, 36%. So with that said, why don't we try it? And then you guys can give your feedback about what you think about this combination of high rye bourbon mash bills.
David, real quick while we're doing that, because I already took a nose and a sip, but what's can you tell us what the age on these?
Yes. So and there'll also be in those 2 mash bills, there'll be a combination of somewhere between 5 to 7. So those 2 mash bills, 5, 6, 7 years old, and then bottled at 94 proof.
94 proof. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Forgot to mention that. Matt, I saw you're like rolling your eyes over there like, wow. What do you see? If you guys notice, I always defer to Matt because Matt has the master palate of the
I say it every show when you bring this up, Mark. If you just say it confidently enough, people start to agree with you.
That's what it's about, right?
Yeah, but you had mentioned as we were walking away from pouring this, Mark, that you got a lot of cherry, and I'm picking up some of the cherry as well on there. There's cherry. I'm getting a good bit of the oak too, coming through from that the 5 to 7 year of age, and the rye is coming through in like the nice. I get the rye coming in as like a baked bread type of like a nice fresh baked grain flavor coming on it that I'm getting from the rye on the nose. It's really, really nice.
Yeah. And on the palate for me, it's, again, I get that the rye, I get the sweetness, kind of a caramel on the front. I get a little bit of spice Well, I get a lot of spice on this one, which is nice. Again, it's not one of those knock you down kind of spice. It coats the mouth. It's a nice tingle. It's a tingle on the tongue, and I enjoy that. And to me, I almost pick up kind of like a burnt brown sugar flavor on this one on the finish, which is really nice. But then it lingers, and that spiciness continues on the tongue, which I really enjoy. So this is, really really nice. I like the overall the nosing to the palate, and then to the finish as well.
One of the qualities that rye can give you, right, is to me it is a very complex whiskey and a complex grain, because how you manage it throughout the fermentation distillation process really has a nice dictate in terms of what the final product would be. And the wood treatment is very important, but you can go anywhere from sort of acetylsalic acid like dill and pickle all the way to baking spices, right? And that's, to both your points, when I drink George Remus, I get a lot of cardamom, cinnamon, cumin, that burnt brown sugar. I mean, there's all those great baking spices that really are, I think, reminiscent of the rye.
Yeah, very, very nice. So Matt, what else are you getting on the palate on this one?
On the palate, at first you were saying, Mark, that you're getting like a toasted sweet sugar, and I picked that up, and then I was thinking more about it, and I went back, and I really get like a ginger snap cookie. It has, and Andy, you were saying you get a lot of the baking spices, and I'm picking up a lot of the baking spice that I get from the rye, and something about like a ginger snap where it has like that little bit of a kick to it from ginger that you might get, but it's a nice refreshing kick. And then everything else might be in a ginger snap. Like there's the molasses, a little bit of cinnamon, the cardamom, I'm picking up on it as well. And like a touch of a chocolate, or like a creamy chocolate, or like a seasoned cream on it as well.
Yeah, I get some orange peel too in here. Little citrus on the nose.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because as I was sitting here, I took another drink of it. I actually almost picked up something. It's almost similar, just a slight hint of almost like a black tea, just a little spice or little tea note to it. It was just really far back in there, and it was gone. It was like it just really quick, and it dissipated. So it's just kind of funny because you were talking about you go back after a taste, and you take another taste, and you're going to pick up something different, something else. So yeah, it's funny. I went back and took another taste, and I'm like, I got a hint of black tea, and then it was gone. So it's kind of neat.
Yeah. And that is the complexity that I was talking about as you put these together, whether it's, an older 36 with a kind of a younger 21. And we use that shorthand, 21% rye, 36% rye in those two mash bills, or vice versa. And so you'll get a lot of different notes. I mean, at the very basic level, when I'm describing this to someone, I'll say it's like cinnamon toast, but on rye bread. We've had cinnamon toast, but it's never been on rye bread. It was always on wheat bread or white bread as growing up. And so you think about it then what that rye bread component would do to cinnamon toast. And so you start thinking about that a little further. And then some of these other more traditional baking spices come in besides just cinnamon. And it just kind of grows from there. So that's kind of the base that I give people. It's cinnamon toast on rye bread, and then kind of these other things really start to blossom as you try it.
Now, see, David, now I'm going to have to go out and get a loaf of rye bread and try that experiment with.
Yeah.
But we also say it's Kentucky on the front and Indiana on the
back. That is true.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I get that. That's great. So now when you're blending this up with this Remus, you're looking for a specific flavor profile? I mean, are there like kind of like guardrails that you work within, and as long as you're within that lane, you're good? Or is there a specific target that you want this Remus to hit this target every time on the profile?
Yeah. So this was a little bit of a hybrid, and here's what I mean by that. So earlier we were talking about how MGP came into brands a few years ago, and our model was we can certainly have organic brands, meaning we're going to just come up with them ourselves, and we'll market them, and we'll talk about that a lot more here in a minute when we talk about our Rossville rye. But if we were to acquire a brand, of course, it had to have, there was a few factors that were important. And the chief important factor was if we're acquiring a brand, they're sourcing from us. And that's exactly what George Remus was. It was a very small brand started by a few folks in Cincinnati. Cincinnati's just 20 miles from our Lawrenceburg, Indiana distillery. And they knew the story of George Remus, which I'll tell you guys here in a minute.
Sure.
And they felt so passionate about the story that that story needed a bourbon. And so they created the George Remus bourbon. It was a very young bourbon, probably only a couple years old, and just the 21% rye. So 75% corn, 21% rye, and 4% barley malt. Because that's what they could afford. You know, it takes a lot of money to start up a brand. It takes a lot of money to buy sourced whiskey. And the older it is, the more it'll cost you. And so they bought what they could afford. But we liked the tie to the distillery. We liked the whole George Remus story and what we could do with that. And we liked, of course, the fact that they sourced some of the bourbon from MGP. We decided right away is we're going to make this more complex by combining these mash bills. We're going to make it certainly smoother by increasing the age significantly. And so we had a starting block, but we certainly built a whole lot on top of that. And so as we took that and said, we're going to combine these mash bills, we have to be careful because the typical, and I always hate to use that word, but the typical bourbon drinker, as we differentiate them from a rye drinker, wants something sweeter. But yet we're offering high rye bourbon. And so we kind of have to walk a fine line that we didn't turn this into a rye whiskey. It's still a bourbon. And so you're going to get some of that sweetness, but then you're going to get that nice rye kick. And so what you've been describing is exactly the profile that we were after. Understand that it's a bourbon. Yes, it's sweet, and but I kind of like this rye kick. Whether I'm going to drink it neat or on the rocks or make a cocktail out of it, that this rye gives it a lot of backbone, but it's still that backbone on this whole kind of platform of sweetness still because it's a bourbon.
Yeah, that makes sense. And as you've talked about that, gone back to revisit, and it seems as it has sat in the glass and aired a little bit, it almost seems to get sweeter to me over time, which is really cool. I really like that. But I still, every time I take a sip, it's the sweetness, and then it's followed by that rye spiciness that comes right back in. And it's a really, really, really good combination. So we should probably move on to the next one in this session. But before we do that,
I'm going to bridge the gap between these two with a story. So the stories of George Remus. So George Remus was a real person. He immigrated to the United States from Germany in the mid 1800s, and his family eventually settled in Chicago. His uncle had a pharmacy. He worked in that pharmacy. He became a pharmacist, and then he took over the uncle's pharmacy. He took over this pharmacy at age 21, and he quickly got bored and decided to go to law school. And so he went to night school, and at age 24, became an attorney in Chicago. This is now 1900. And he still kind of worked in the pharmacy, but his primary business was he was an attorney. And he did anything he could to make a name for himself in Chicago. One of his biggest claims to fame was that he was one of the first, not the first, but one of the first U.S. attorneys to attempt to use the insanity defense to get one of his clients off the hook. It didn't work, but he tried. And then for a couple of decades, he's this good old defense attorney, George Remus. But then in 1920, he gets a whole new set of clients. And of course, those are bootleggers. And he's amazed by these guys. He said two things about them. He goes, I can't believe how much money they have. They get caught, they pull wads of cash out of their pocket, pay the fine, and walk off. And then the other thing he said about them is they're all idiots. And so he knew that he could make prohibition, specifically the Volstead Act that gave us prohibition, work for him. And as he studied it, of course, one of the biggest loopholes in that was that you could still sell medicinal alcohol. In 1920, most of our pharmaceuticals were just basically alcohol. And you could still get a prescription during Prohibition for members of your family to get a pint a month or a pint every 5 weeks. And I call it the longest 13-year period of the croup that ever occurred in this country, because every parent went in to get a prescription because their kid had a cough so they could go get some whiskey. So he moved from Chicago to Cincinnati. And the reason he moved to Cincinnati is he was within a few hundred miles of all these shuttered whiskey warehouses, and including warehouses on our distillery campus in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, but of course, all throughout Kentucky. And that's the misconception we have about Prohibition, is that all the whiskey in this country was just dumped. We see those photos where they took the axe to the barrel and putting it down the drain. Well, those were all publicity shots. Whatever alcohol you owned when Prohibition started was yours to keep, including these warehouses. So he could get a permit to take whiskey out so that he could bottle it for medicinal purposes. He got those permits lawfully, some by bribes, some by forgeries, but he started taking the whiskey out of the warehouses for that. And he quickly realized he could make a lot more money if he would just bootleg this stuff. And so he devised a plan where some of his men were executing a lawful permit to pull barrels out of the warehouse. They'd get them all loaded up, maybe go down the road about a quarter of a mile, and then some of his other men would come hijack those guys. He could claim he got robbed. He'd go back and say, I never got to execute this permit, go pull out more barrels, and start the cycle all over again.
Okay.
And he just kept getting robbed. He set up a little operation outside of Cincinnati, became known as Death Valley Farm, had a long, windy driveway or lane through some hills and timber. And if you didn't know the right combination of light flashes with the headlights, a sniper might take out the headlights or the tires or perhaps the driver. So that's where it got the name Death Valley Farm. George Remus starts bootlegging, and long story short, he was very successful. At one point, George Remus is controlling 35% of all the bootleg whiskey in the United States. And
Wow.
He became very wealthy, let's put it that way. And he wanted everyone to know how wealthy he was. He bought a big mansion in Cincinnati, started throwing huge parties. This is where the stereotype came that if you were rich, you would light a cigar with $100 bill, because that's exactly what George Remus did. Sometimes he would serve a meal, and under the plate was $1,000 bill. At some of his parties, he would give away jewelry. He cleaned out entire Cincinnati jewelry stores so that he could lavish his guests with gifts. And at one party, he gave every man a diamond stick pin, and all the women were looking around like, well, what do we get? And pretty much on cue, the servants came out. They gave each woman a little box. Inside the box was a set of keys. He let them outside, and lining the driveway and the adjoining streets were brand new cars. And so I call him the first Oprah, because all the women had a brand new
You
car.
get a car, and you get a car, and you get a
That's
car.
right.
Yeah.
That's right. So you can understand that people wanted to get to know this guy, George Remus.
Yeah.
And the legend is that one of his acquaintances was F. Scott Fitzgerald, and that Remus and the life that Remus lived then became the inspiration for Gatsby in The Great Gatsby. Actually, the legend is those two, Remus and Fitzgerald, met in the Seelbach Hotel in Louisville. And if you go there, they tell that story too, about how those two met. And whether they actually met or not, if you just think of the story I just told about George Remus and then think about The Great Gatsby, there is a lot of similarity. And so we certainly believe it and want to honor that. And that's why now we're going to try our Remus Repeal Reserve.
Yes.
And while your listeners can't see it, when they see the bottle, they're going to see that it doesn't look like your typical bourbon bottle, but with its Art Deco kind of roaring 20s look and feel to it, it's our nod to George Remus being that inspiration for Gatsby and then kind of all things roaring 20s as well.
That's a great story. And bourbon is obviously about stories. I mean, you got to have a good product, obviously, but you got to have great stories. And that's a great story. But the biggest takeaway I get from that story, David, is that as an attorney, there's still hope for me.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Right.
That's right. So now we have our Remus Repeal Reserve, and where we talked about with our George Remus at 94 proof, you're blending to a profile. You want to keep that profile with every bottling. The Remus Repeal is an annual release, and each year, by design, it's supposed to be slightly different. And so we're trying Series 4, and so that's our fourth rendition of this. There's a Roman numeral in the neck of that, on the neck label. Mm-hmm. So that tells you you're in Series 4. And where with our George Remus at 94 proof, we put these various mash bills together. We don't talk about percentages because they might change. Two very different things with Remus Repeal Reserve. One is that all the bourbon is over 10 years old. And two, we put right on the label the years of the individual mash bills and then the percentage of each of those mash bills in that release. So everything is right on the front label that you would probably ever want to know about this bourbon. So how much of the 21 is in this? How much of the 36? What years are those? And so we wanted to be extremely transparent when we came out with our Remus Repeal Reserve.
And that's great, because transparency, that's such a big thing. And these days it's funny because, bourbon drinkers and rye drinkers, everybody wants to know everything. And it's like, they're going to jump on the TTB's website and see what their labels say and check everything out. I mean, it's insane we're kind of bourbon nerds, but we enjoy it. We're not going to get, be quite like that. But I understand transparency is huge and that's great that you guys have chosen to do that. So Matt, you've been over there sniffing on this one for a few. It tickled your mustache. I noticed that little nose, that nose twitch. So
and before Matt says anything, what I forgot to mention is this is at 100 proof. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So we've stepped it up just a little bit on the proofage on this one. So Matt, what do you got?
I get a lot of oranges on the nose. I get oranges and I get white peppercorns and like a little bit of graham cracker as well. I think maybe the graham cracker also is kind of leading way to some oak from the age that I'm picking up. But a lot of oranges, and it's got a really, really nice color, a really, really great dark color to it. Yeah,
definitely does. And the nose, I agree. Obviously, a much more descriptive explanation than what I would give. On the palate on this one, again, it's that sweetness and then combined with that spiciness of. I love that combination where you just get that initial wave of sweetness, and then it's just all of a sudden you get that spice just kind of creeps up on you. And again, it's not overwhelming at all, but it's such a nice compliment. And again, so you've got me, David, you got me all torn up about this rye cinnamon toast that I'm gonna have to go out and get some rye bread and put some of that together now.
One of the interesting evolutions of our rye, when you go from 5 years to 10 years, that rye becomes very mellow, right? Very soft. And it's, to Matt's point, I think that's where you get all that kind of rich candy, that orange, that citrus, it becomes, whereas, in George Remus bourbon, you're getting that rye bread, that, you're drinking rye, and it's well blended. When you drink the Repeal Reserve, that rye is, I think, fully incorporated. You have sort of a complete whiskey, right? And it's just very warm, and I get a lot of sort of Christmas fruit, right? Candied black fruit, and I get the orange too, Matt. I mean, this is just a great sipping whiskey.
Yeah, this is, and it seems like David, I mentioned earlier, I think we had done some type of an event, or you had done an event with somebody. I don't know if it was the Bourbon Brotherhood in Kentucky, somewhere. We did a Zoom call, and it was about this. And I already had a bottle, so I sat and drank quite a bit on the Zoom call, and was just super impressed with the blend on this, with the combination of everything. I love that sweetness and then that spiciness. It's a great combination, and I don't know what else I can say about that, Matt. It's like Forrest Gump. I don't know what else I can say, right?
So our first series 1, came out in 2017, and I suppose the scientist in me wanted people to experience our high rye bourbons, but just the variable being age. So, regular George Remus is 5 to 7 years old at 94 proof. We're going to have this 10 to 12-year-old product. It should also be at 94 proof, so that there's no variation with the proof. Let's just see what age does. And so Series 1 was bottled at 94 proof, and it got a lot of good reviews. It got a lot of nice press, good accolades. There was only one negative thing said about it, and that was, I wish it was a little higher proof. Wish it was a little higher proof. And I suppose if suggested retail's $84 or whatever, that you thought, well, I'd like a little more proof. And so we thought about that, and we really debated about, should we change the proof? I mean, if we change it, does it vary? Does it go back and forth? And so we did Series 2 at 100 proof, and there were no negative comments. Nobody said, oh, it's just higher proof for that. And so we decided to just leave it at 100 proof, and not go like, well, this year it's 102, and this year's it's 101. Because really, once you go up, it's hard to go back down. It was just better to just leave it at 100 proof. And there's another kind of functional reason for doing that too. And the MGP warehouses are majority brick. So they're multiple stories, generally 6 stories tall, 6 barrels per floor or story. And because they are so well insulated by the brick and 2 feet thick, floors and ceilings, they stay very cool even in the summertime, and they stay very humid. And that cool, humid combination allows the barrel to absorb more water than it's losing. So all barrels are losing alcohol. That's the angel share. But depending on its environment, it'll absorb or displace water. And so over time, a traditional MGP barrel will go down in proof. Barrel entry for us is 120 proof. That was started decades ago, back in the Seagram's days. They knew that, of course, you could go up to the legal limit of 125 and use fewer barrels, but through a lot of experimentation, it was felt that extra water in the barrel helped extract more flavor compounds out of the wood. And so 120 proof. And quite honestly, after about 12, even 13 years, those barrels could almost just be 100 proof. And so there is very little water added to our Remus Repeal Reserve to get it to 100 proof, because over that decade plus, it's absorbed its own water, which I really feel helps to make for a more mellow whiskey, as opposed to some of those barrels that could be in the top of a tin warehouse that get to 140 degrees in the summertime and the water's flying out of them. That makes for a great, really high barrel proof product, but it's not necessarily the smoothest thing either.
Right.
And it's not just because of proof.
Right. So all your warehouses then, they're all brick and they got the color.
So the vast majority of them are brick. We have some that we have constructed in the last few years that are else kind of simulate that because they're spancrete, but they're only 1 story tall, or they're insulated tin and only 1 story tall. And so as we've needed to construct new warehousing, we really try to do it so that it would mimic the environment that we have in the brick ones. And so we have temperature and humidity monitors and all of those. And so far the way we've built them, the profile is ringing true on that. So that's
very
good.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. Very nice. So I tell you what, we kind of we've gone over a little bit, but we had 2 different things to drink. We had to go through them, so we have to take extra time.
Yeah, we had to take our time on this one.
All right. So let's get some closing thoughts on the Repeal Reserve. Matt, what do you got? Final thoughts on that one?
I think something that Andy had said that I really picked up on as well was the spices. And as I was drinking this, I was getting, again, the oranges and something like a mulling spice came through to me. Perfect. And that very Christmassy and the mulling spice on it. And I think, Andy, you had said it's just a really good sipping whiskey. And I can't really think of too many better ways to describe it than just a really good sipping whiskey. It's got a lot of flavor. It's not harsh in the least. At 100 proof, you're definitely getting what you pay for out of it. And David, what you were saying, there's not a whole lot of water in here, so we're getting a lot of what you're trying to bring forth in the bourbon itself, and it's really good. This really is really good sipping whiskey.
Yeah, I would concur with that, Matt, for sure. Obviously, I've sipped quite a bit of the bottle. So, and Matt was talking about the value of the bottle. So we forgot to mention earlier the 8 and Sand in terms of retail pricing on that. Do you guys want to? What's the cost on that?
So 8 and Sand, our suggested retail is $29.99.
Okay,
and then George Remus mainline, the 94 proof, is $39.99. And our Repeal Reserve, our suggested retail is about $84.99.
Yeah, I mean that's all great pricing. I mean, there's when you're seeing you guys know you see bottles out there on the shelves that are $299, $299, and it's so that's great pricing. And this Repeal Reserve, so this will be a yearly release, just a different combination of whatever, however you guys work it out.
Yeah, David and I have already tasted Series 5 for next year. I mean, we already know what it's going to be. So, this is an annual release. It's going to be different every year, but no younger than 10 years old.
Wow. That's amazing.
And the other key thing about our Remus Repeal Reserve is while it is a limited release, we don't believe in that it's so limited you can't find it. And you will be able to find it. We do say, though, when you see it, buy it, because if you think I'll come back to the store next week and get it, it could be gone. And so we truly
our goal is to release it, in the September-October period. Actually, a quick story. I know we're over time. We had engineered this thing perfectly because George's birthday is November 13th.
Oh, yeah.
And we thought every year we're gonna release it on November 13th, just like Beaujolais Nouveau, and it will carry us through Repeal Day. We've had so much demand for this product. What we did actually starting this year is, with September being National Bourbon Heritage Month, we released it early because the trade. I mean, our accounts were demanding it. So we're going to release it every year in September, and when it's done, it's done. But we're going to release enough so it's 4, 5, 6 months. So it's if people can have a bottle, give it as a gift, come back for another one.
There you go. That's great. All right. So final thoughts, Matt. Did you already talk about that? See, I've already been drinking.
Yeah, we did. That's funny. Andy, I'm impressed that you all are making it to Bourbon Heritage Month with this release. I thought you were going to say that George's birthday was in November, and we finally decided we had to go on his half birthday or something and put it out a little bit earlier. So, but this is a good reason to be excited about Bourbon Heritage Month every year.
Yeah, no kidding. So, all right, well, let's take a break, get a word from our sponsor, and we'll come back with more with Andy Mansinne and David Whitmer with MGP. So everybody sit tight, and we'll be back in just a second. Hey, Bourbon Lifers, I know this is the point in the show where we usually hear a word from a sponsor, but instead this week, Matt and I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you. Thank you for all of your support through the first season of the Bourbon Life Podcast. You all have made this journey absolutely amazing for us. We've had so much fun bringing you great guests and reviews each week, and we hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have. And as we look forward to next season, we're making some big plans, and we can't wait to share those with you soon. And as always, if you have any questions for us, please feel free to connect with us on Instagram, join our private Facebook group, The Bourbon Lifers, or just shoot us an email at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. We love hearing from you guys, and we humbly appreciate all of your support this year. As my good friend and co-host Matt always says, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. And may your glasses always be full, and may you keep on living the Bourbon Life. All right, everybody, welcome back for the third and final session of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, still, thankfully, is my co-host, Matt. Matt, you hanging in over there?
Absolutely. I wouldn't miss this final session for anything. We've been having a great show so far with Andy Mansinne and David Whitmer of MGP, and I think the best is yet to come.
Matt, you're a rye guy, man. So this is all for you, Matt.
That's right. Session number 3. This might be my favorite session yet. We'll see. So we'll get right down to it. What have we got poured up, gentlemen?
Well, what we have tonight are the 2 expressions of Rossville Union Rye, which is our Mastercraft 94 proof and our barrel proof at 112.6. And before we dive in to the tasting, I just a couple quick things about Rossville Union. When people in the whiskey world talk about MGP, right, the first thing they say is it's all about rye, and it's true. We are the largest rye distiller in America. We're famous, and our reputation really rests on rye, and it's for a lot of reasons, and we can get into that later about how hard it is to manage that grain, and how easy it is to burn it during fermentation. But what really, what's really, I think, important about the Rossville Union is the fact that when we talked about being 4 years old and starting this brands group, we made a pact with ourselves. Our foundational values really are about being true to the brands, being brand centric. And what we talk about is being responsible for provenance and authenticity. And those are really big words. And what it really means, right, is every brand has a story, but every story is true. And so when we talk about Rossville Union, and the other quick point here is one of the when in our earlier in the previous section when we were talking about Rossville Union, one of the Repeal Reserve and George Remus, one of the things that kept coming back at us when we were talking to the trade and the press, they love the brands, but they're like, you're famous for rye. Why didn't you launch with a rye? And Rossville Union was the 3rd brand we launched. And the reason for that is we really wanted to do it right. We wanted the best rye someone could drink. And because, our reputation rided on it. So let me just tell you a couple of quick things before we taste. So Rossville Union. So, hey guys, how'd you come up with this name? This is Rossville Union. Provenance and authenticity is the original name of the distillery. It was founded in 1847, and it's right there on the crest of the neck of the bottle. Was founded in 1847 by George Ross. We love Georges, right? We love George Remus. Now we have George Ross. But George Ross was a businessman. He was a mercantilist in Cincinnati, and the reason why he founded it in in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, is that we sit on top of the Miami Aquifer, this largest aquifer of pure filtered water that's 55 degrees, cool, 365 days a year. But he also founded the distillery on that site because since 1809 they had been distilling rye because of the aquifer, because of the ability to get to cool water. And so, with the heritage of distilling in Lawrenceburg, by the way, that's why we call it Whiskey City. That's why it's called Whiskey City. We really give homage to George Ross and the founders of distilling in that region. And so we harken back to the name of Rossville Union. Now, as David had talked about with 8 and Sand and with George Remus bourbon, we have blended our several of our rye mash bills with for Rossville Union. So in our first rye, which is Mastercraft, the 94 proof, we have a blend of our 95.5 rye as well as our 51% rye. So 51% rye and 45% corn and 4% malted barley. And they're aged, again, 5 to 7 years. And what Dave and the team were striving for is we really wanted a smooth, easy to drink rye. Now, some may call it a cocktail rye. You notice with both this Mastercraft and with George Remus, we really like 94 proof because it keeps the integrity of the whiskey there in cocktails, but you don't water it down. But the other thing, when we purposely waited and we did a lot of research with consumers before we launched Rossville Union, and we the reason why we did that is because we spent a lot of time talking to consumers, and you really had this dichotomy. You sort of had the Matt group who knew whiskeys. They were really intense. They really wanted a very discerning, complex rye. And then you had this other group of consumers who said, I like whiskey, but I need to know more about it, right? I'm not quite sure. And it really crystallized for us when we were doing some research with consumers, where these guys were just bragging about cocktails and loving cocktails, and it's just great because it's because of cocktails that the whiskey culture has been reborn. But when we started to ask them a little bit more about what it is about the cocktail and the whiskey, they could talk all day long about bourbon, but when you talked about rye, they kind of stopped. And when you asked them about why can't you talk about rye? Well, one consumer just looked at us and said, "Well, it hurts." And it was like we suddenly realized we really need to make a soft rye, and so that's what we did with Mastercraft. That's a long way to introduce you to this, but David and his team really worked hard to get a blend of our mash bills that made it easy to be introduced to rye. So why don't we just try it?
Sure. Definitely. Cheers.
Salute.
Matt, you're over there smelling it, man. Are you not drinking it yet? What's going on?
Oh no, don't worry about me. So the 51% rye in here, and knowing that there's a 45% corn, makes sense because I do pick up some sweetness of the corn. Sweet. And not like the 95.5 rye and just a huge rye nose. It's very soft and balanced with that little bit of the corn that's in there from the blend as well. But I do on the nose, I pick up getting like dill and some herbal flavors, a little bit of graham cracker as well on the nose. And then the palate is just really nice. And this is one of the first that we've had tonight where I really get this nice long finish, a nice spicy, peppery finish but it's rounded, it's complete. I get again like the dill and some herbs on the palate with it, a little bit of like a lime zest or a zesty flavor as well.
Yeah,
you're getting a lot of freshness, right? I mean, Matt, I think you hit the nail on the head here, is because when I drink the Mastercraft, I'm getting kind of from the garden herbs, right? I'm pulling a little thyme and a little parsley and a little dill. I mean, you can almost see the leaves, right? You can almost see those herbs, in your glass, and you're getting it on your nose. I mean, it's really fresh.
Yeah, that's a really good way to describe it. And then on the palate for me, it's like you get the. I'm surprised at how sweet it was, because I took a sip before. Andy, you kind of got through the explanation as to the combination of the blend itself. And I was really surprised at the level of sweetness that I got. But then after you talked about the 51 mix being in there as well, then that made more sense. Like Matt said, you detect that sweetness, but that rye really shines through, and that's so good, so good.
Yeah, we've sort of, it's almost like we put the 21% bourbon on its head, right? I mean, you're still getting plenty of sweetness, but when you lead with that spice, and it really softens up. And so my compliments to David Whitmer and the blending team, because it's really art. I will talk a little bit though about rye. We have a program called Rye Education, Masters of Rye, where David will lead people through component tasting. So we will really deconstruct the mash bills and let people not only taste the different mash bills, but blend themselves. And, one of the things that, and again, this sounds like, blowing our own horn, but rye is a very difficult grain. When you start to, boil it, right, and cook it, right, to ferment, if you start that fermentation too high, it can turn into school paste. I mean, it literally becomes thick and it burns. And of course, whiskey, you can't fix whiskey in editing like an ad, right? It's like, oh, well, we'll edit it out. No. It's like, once it's burned, it's burnt. And you can taste that in other ryes, right? When it's harsh and it hurts. I think it's a lot about how the fermentation went. And our distilling teams do a phenomenal job of low, slow, great fermentations that bring out all these rich flavors.
So when you guys, David, when you set out to do this, and this was your third one, you came up the Rossville. This was your third, right? So this is the one. Yep. Did you say we want it to be like this? This is the flavor profile, or was it just kind of an experience of, here's what we want to blend together, and as you started the process, you just developed that flavor profile?
Probably more of the latter. And it really goes on what Andy was saying as we talked to people and what they had to say about rye, how they felt about rye, that the goal for this was to truly be an approachable rye.
Okay.
And so it did need to have a little bit of that sweetness in it, which of course led to the 51 rye, 45 corn, 4% barley malt. Of course, it was going to have 95.5. There's another little mash bill in here we haven't talked about, which is 51% rye, 49% barley malt. And so that higher barley malt can give it almost sometimes a nutty characteristic, but also a little creaminess to it as well. And so the combination of all three of those mash bills really added to the complexity. And it was really kind of a fun debate about, as different ones of us put the blends together, about which one would we actually decide on. And generally when that happens, they're all good and you kind of split the difference, if you will. But it did. It had to kind of lead sweet, but as Matt talked about, that really super long, spicy rye finish. And so that's what we wanted out of this one.
Yeah, and it's amazing as I sit here and continue to taste on it, the finish on this one. I mean, and the other finishes from the Remus, I mean, the finish was good. I mean, there was no question about it. But this one just continues. It lingers and goes on, and that spiciness, the rye, really, really comes through. So that's pretty amazing. So
and you'll certainly get what I call the classic barrel notes of caramel and vanilla and butterscotch. Those get muted out in a really high rye, and so you get a little more of that with the 251s.
Yeah, and now we also have the barrel proof too.
Yes,
that we've got here. If you guys want to talk a little bit about that one.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I want Dave to talk about the technicalities, but just sort of from the strategic side, as we were trying to address the more approachable rye, with Mastercraft, we did not want to, alienate, right, the serious whiskey drinkers, the serious rye drinkers. But we also wanted, again, as David said at the very beginning, we needed to be unique. We needed to do something different because we just didn't want people to walk up and go, "Oh, MGP, right? I've already tasted you." So,
right. Mm-hmm.
So we worked on the blend on that for a long time, and I think, well, let's taste through, and then we can talk about it.
Yeah, Andy, I think to your point, it would be, and I like what you've done with the Mastercraft. It was Mastercraft or Master Blend?
Mastercraft, yeah.
Yeah, the Mastercraft Rossville rye. I think what's really great about that is what you didn't give us, because it would be really easy for you all to come forward and say, well, 95.5, that's right in our wheelhouse. Let's blend a bunch together. Let's give you rye. We'll bring it down to 94 and we'll show you. Like, we'll give you rye. You want rye? Here's rye. And so I think what's really great about it is what you didn't give us. You sought out to make a blend that's approachable, that isn't just going to blow someone away with 95.5 and with strong, bold flavors. But I think that is a lot of really where the art shows out in this, and where the craft comes forward is in taking something you all are so good at, which is rye, and making it different, making it approachable, and giving us more with, I don't want to say like more with less, but like by blending more and by showing more, you've really taken this product and not just gone to what everyone thinks of when they see MGP, which to me would be just big, bold, hot, spicy rye. And I really like that about the Mastercraft.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Have you tasted the barrel proof yet?
So the barrel proof, this is one of the great things about having family of mine spread out kind of all across the U.S. is every time I go to see everyone, I get to see everyone, but I also know that there will be an open bottle of the barrel proof in everyone's liquor cabinet, because this is a staple in my family. And so I know anytime I go to visit somebody that I'm related to, there's going to at least be Rossville Union barrel proof on the bar. So how
did you come to discover this?
Found it here in Lexington, kind of on the tip of a friend, and tried it, and then was blown away. So I had to have it on my bar. And then kind of family coming in, I said, you got to try this. And so we went through, and everyone was just absolutely blown away. And so for a few Christmases, I think I ended up wrapping at least a case of this for different family members and spreading it around. And so now anytime I head home or I travel, I always at least have a backup bottle with me in case somebody's running low, so that we can restock them. So if not for their benefit, but also for mine when I visit.
Thank you.
Well, you're gonna need hats and t-shirts, Matt. So,
Matt's going to be going to work. Matt's going to be going to work for MGP here. It's going to be the Bourbon Life with Mark and Matt's moving on now.
Yeah. So earlier, when we were talking about Mastercrafted, Matt, you talked about the graham cracker, which I thought was perfect, because I always try to give people very relatable kind of analogies to our whiskey. And the relatable analogy for barrel proof is a liquid s'more.
Oh,
because you get that graham, you've got that sweet from the marshmallow. There is this really nice chocolate note in it.
Yep.
But it's also a burnt marshmallow because you're going to get a little smoke-ish on the finish with that rye. And so that's my food pairing with this whiskey is a nice s'more.
Yeah, talking about the s'more and the chocolate, I was picking that up on this one. So this is the barrel proof. So you're getting the same. I mean, it's the same mash bill. I mean, it's the same thing, right? Or
Well,
No,
it's actually not. It is
Okay.
a different combination of those mash bills. So it's not just master crafted at a higher proof or reversed. It's, master crafted is not barrel proof at a lower proof.
Okay.
So whenever you blend, you have to have the proof that you're going to bottle at. And while master crafted probably would be very good at its barrel proof, it wouldn't be as good as barrel proof. And barrel proof may not be as good at 94 as it is at barrel proof. So you blend knowing the proof you're going to bottle at, and you'll make adjustments because of that. The thing with rye is if I taste people blind, I don't tell you any proof, most average people are going to guess anywhere from 3 to 5, maybe even 6 proof higher when they're tasting a rye, because the way that rye excites the palate, it kind of tricks the brain that you think it's higher alcohol. And so we have to balance that as you think about something that's over 110 proof, that the rye doesn't take over and then get in the way because it's being perceived as more alcohol. So it is a kind of a balancing act there with the proof and the ratio of those mash bills.
Yeah, that makes sense. And this is, I mean, this barrel proof is, well, Matt,
Yeah,
I know you got to be like, you're absolutely loving this, man. You're grinning over there. I can tell.
Yeah, I've been trying to. I'm excited for you to try this, Mark, because this is like one that I hold near and dear to my heart. Obviously, as I said, that this is like pretty much in the will of my family that everybody gets a bottle of this on my deathbed. So this is
now earlier when we talked about Remus Repeal Reserve, and I talked about the warehouses and how the barrels absorb water over time. That's why at a barrel proof it's 112.6. We have just, and Andy will talk about this here in a minute. We have introduced single barrels, barrel picks in both our George Remus line and our Rossville line. That's the thing. As soon as you start a brand, people want to know when I can do a barrel pick. It's like, good Lord, let me get started first, please, and then we'll talk about barrel picks. And barrel picks was a little hard for us because that was really deconstructing the brand. Because if you're going to do a barrel pick, you're picking a mash bill.
A barrel, right?
And so in the George Remus line, we gave the various mash bills blind, and it was often funny to watch people insist something was a 36. It was really a 21, and kind of the same with our Rossville. People, I swear this has got more barley malt, and this one's got to be the corn, and then they're wrong. But they liked it. That's all that matters is you like it. But before we talk about those, the other bit of transparency that we wanted to give with our Rossville line is you will see on both the master crafted and the barrel proof the number of barrels used for those bottlings. Okay. So we've done a couple of bottlings for the master crafted where we used 159 barrels, and then on the barrel proof 86. And we've kind of done the same for label efficiency, but I think we need to change those up and have it be a different number of barrels. And so, because people talk about small batch, just like, well, what's that mean? It doesn't mean anything. Yeah. It's a marketing term. I'm sure MGP's small batch is bigger than a lot of people's big batch, and so it's all relative. So, but what is standard is, 53-gallon whiskey barrel.
Right.
And so to let people know that we went out and picked the very best 159 barrels for particular bottlings, or the very best 86 barrels for particular barrel proof bottlings, is something that we wanted people to know. That, in our thought processes, this is a small batch. At least it's fewer than 200 barrels, or certainly less than 100 barrels that we went out and picked for you.
Very nice. So, Andy, tell us a little bit about your barrel program there, because obviously people go nuts.
Well, we just finished our very first barrel select barrel pick program for 2020, and the sort of the strange story behind this is that literally when we launched George Remus, the first question is, can we do a barrel pick? And then when we launched Rossville, can we do a barrel pick? And David and I literally have spent hours in a dark room, sort of pounding our heads against the wall, going, these are multiple mash bills. How are we going to do this? So, I'm Italian, and my grandparents were big cooks, and so I love cooking, and one of my great heroes is Greg Aschatz at Alinea in Chicago, who kind of perfected molecular cooking, and that's how I look at our barrel program. We've deconstructed our mash bills in order to go give people these this program. So very quickly, what we did is it is dumb luck. Okay, I'm just going to tell you right now, there was no strategy behind this. We announced on January 3rd, 2020, that we were going to do barrel picks, and it was only going to last from January 10th to March 18th. Now, March 18th is a really important date, right? That is, March 14th is when the world shut down with COVID. And, with great, with really sort of, great acknowledgement and thanks to David and his team and the whole distilling team in Lawrenceburg, we had probably, 200 people come through the distillery on a daily basis, twice a day, tasting barrels. And we've never done this before. So the teams just, we all rallied and we tried to, we figured it out. But what we did is we deconstructed all the mash bills. So with George Remus, we offered it at cask strength, so 21% high rye bourbon and 36% high rye bourbon. And for Rossville Union, in order to be different, we did bottled and bond. So it was 100 proof.
Yeah.
Same season. And we used, the mash bills. And to say it was successful is an understatement, because we were hoping to sell 50 barrels and we sold almost 300. So, it was really nice. And,
wow.
But I think what was more important about this is that, people got to see the distillery. They got to see the teams. They got to see who we are. And, everybody who would leave, they bought 5 or they bought 6 or they bought 1 barrel. They all left saying, oh my God, you people, you work so hard, and I didn't realize you were open 24 hours a day. And you mean I can't buy a T-shirt? You don't have a visitor center. So, we really are, we used it as a way to just to bring everybody closer. And literally, I'm going to end on this little quick story, is that we finished our sales on March 14th, and, the world is shutting down. And literally that very first weekend of quarantine, I called all my guys. And I called David. I said, we might have a problem here, because what's the world going to look like? And we made a decision. We said, we're going to call every single account and tell them if they don't feel like they can buy this barrel because of COVID, we will cancel their order.
Wow.
We had 2 orders canceled. And literally a month later, those 2 accounts called up and said, we still want our barrel. Can we do it? So, I mean, it was like, to me, that is the moral of the story. It's,
sure.
If you treat people right, good things happen. But we're doing it again this year. I'll just tell you, we're going to again have George Remus as cast strength, and we're going to move Rossville Union to cast strength, and we're going to introduce the 95.5. We have a few barrels that we can sell. So again, it'll be sort of January 3rd through March 15th. A limited time, but and unfortunately, because we don't know what's going on with COVID, we're not going to be able to have tours and tastings at the distillery, but we're going to bring the distillery out to everybody else. We're going to have virtual tastings. We've got some videos. We've got a lot of things planned to bring the distillery there. And for anyone who buys a barrel this year, we're going to give them, like Willy Wonka, a golden ticket for them to redeem at a distillery tour in the future. So David's already said he'll be there. So it'll all be good.
Now, when you said barrel proof Rossville Union, Matt, I just saw Matt go.
Yeah, my eyes like, bing.
Yeah.
It sounds like Matt could probably get his family together.
Yeah.
We need to get you guys here to the distillery. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, you know what, Matt? That could be a good the Bourbon Life barrel pick for us. What do you think?
You're not going to twist my arm too hard to get me there.
Oh man. All right, guys. Well, I'll tell you what, we probably should wrap it up. But before we do, let's get some final thoughts on the Rossville Union. Matt, what do you think, man?
The more it's sitting in the glass here, the more I'm really picking up on the smokiness that you were talking about, David, and the campfire qualities. And again, I'm getting the graham cracker and some of the baking and that toasted marshmallow and a little bit of the chocolate I think might be coming through from the higher barley malt. But I also get, again, just the herbal, the freshness of the herbs in this, like a really nice tarragon and orange zest and like the lime. And it's just got a great, nice, fresh cracked peppercorn spice to it. And it really has a finish that coats well on the tongue and just leaves me like just really pleased. This is just a really, really great product.
It's a huge family tradition.
It is.
Well, I agree, Matt.
It could be a dangerous tradition because you have several of these before you know it. It's like, oh my gosh, I've had a bunch of barrel proof.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, it's 100. What was it? 112.6. 112, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, and that was an easy sipper. And I'm a high proof guy, and I mean, seriously, that was really, really nice, really easy to drink, Matt. So I completely understand because I hadn't had the barrel proof. So I'm happy to have tried that one now. So that's very good. So guys, before we wrap it up, is there anything you want to share with our listeners? I mean, things that are coming up for you guys, or where they can find you guys, or what's going on?
Yeah. So first of all, I want to thank both of you for taking the time. We are very honored and humbled that you'd want to spend time with us. We love what we do. We bleed brown. I mean, we love whiskey. It's all good. So Brown for we MGP brands. We're currently in 16 states. Just think about the Midwest and Texas and Colorado, where we're working next year to open up both East Coast and West Coast. We do have one new brand that we're going to be rolling out in the new year. It's called Green Hat Gin. We purchased it 4 minutes before the quarantine hit. It is our newest distillery in Washington, D.C. I hate to admit it, I'm almost embarrassed, but it's in honor of another guy named George Cassidy, who was the bootlegger to Congress. He wore a green fedora, which is why we call it Green Hat Gin. And he would, all the senators and chief justices and representatives would find him, and he would serve them. He would find, probably through George Remus, would get them their illegal stash. So Green Hat is coming to a market near you very soon. We're going to open up with 4 SKUs. We have a Navy Strength. We have a original batch, which is really reminiscent of the DC and Baltimore area with celery salt, and we also have a citrus floral reminiscent of DC with cherry blossoms, and we have a great liqueur called Summer Cup, which is like a PEMS, and we're going to be doing a lot of innovation around that. But David is leading that distillery team, a great group of innovators, and we're really excited.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, Thank you, David. Anything else you want to add before we kind of wrap things up on this?
Well, if you haven't had a chance to go out and find Remus Repeal Series 4, please do so. I think you're really going to enjoy it. It will probably pique your curiosity to see it. Can I still find Series 3 out there? And then looking forward to Series 5. So there's definitely going to be a Series 5 in 2021. Andy and I already talked about how we've already finalized that blend. And it amazes me how far in advance you have to do things, to get the labels ready and the bottles ready and everything for something you're not even going to put out till September. But
those damn attorneys.
Yeah, I know.
True.
We won't bottle it till late summer anyway, but still, get it ready. So we're always excited about each year's Remus Repeal Reserve, and of course our new programs with the barrel picks, especially Rossville at the barrel proof. But at the end of the day, people always ask me a lot of times, well, which one's your favorite? And it's like picking a child, and it's just hard. But certainly the top stars are certainly always for me, whatever Remus we've just done, Remus Repeal. And then I'm kind of like Matt, got a soft spot for the barrel proof for Rossville. But they're all very good, and they'll satisfy all kinds of price ranges. Andy, I don't think we talked about Rossville price ranges.
Yeah.
No, we didn't. So I'll go up the food chain. So 8 and Sand is $29.99. George Remus is $39.99. Repeal Reserve is $84.99. And then when we talk about Rossville Union, Mastercraft is the same price as George Remus, $39.99. Okay. And the barrel proof is $59.99. So, very reasonable, what we would call underpriced versus competition.
I would definitely say that is underpriced versus competition that is selling MGP stuff relabeled and rebottled. No, that's great, guys. So, we really appreciate you all spending the evening with us. I know you guys, it's a Monday, obviously a full work day for you guys, and I know we've held you over, but we really appreciate the time together and the stories. So before we wrap it up, guys, anything else you want to add? Matt, anybody want to throw anything in?
I just want to say thank you both, Andy and David, for talking to us. I know we could have done everybody that's listening, if you're familiar at all with MGP, you're probably very familiar with it under other brands, labels, and in different bottles. But I really enjoyed the chance to see what you all have put out from your own offerings and what you all are doing for your brand and for MGP. And I think that was the really great thing that I learned, and the lesson for me tonight was just hearing about what you all are doing and the great work that you've done and helping other brands get their feet off the ground and get going. But to hear what you all have been putting forward and the work that you've done, and to sort of take off that, I feel like there was like maybe a secrecy cloak or something over MGP, and to hear about everything that you all are doing it's been really great. Thank you for sitting down and taking the time to chat with us and sharing your great products. We really appreciate that, and I know our listeners will too.
Well, we do have a secret Dakota ring for you.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
But we've had a great time. Listen, we love doing this, and I will speak for David. I don't want to speak for David, but these experiences are phenomenal for us because all we can do is give you our best and hope that consumers taste us, and we really appreciate your support.
Well, you guys are very welcome, and definitely thank you again for being a part of our podcast tonight. We've enjoyed it tremendously. David, how about anything else you want to add before we get out of here?
No, again, just thanks for having us. Really appreciate the support.
Great. Thank you, guys. All right. Well, I'm going to thank our sponsor, which is, again, the Stave Restaurant out there in Millville, Kentucky. Check those guys out online, thestavekentucky.com. Get some great food from Chef Jonathan Sanning. They're wonderful people. And if you can support them, we'd really ask you to do that, especially now during the COVID shutdown here in Kentucky. A lot of the restaurants locally need our support. So please give them the support that they need at this point. And with that said, I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to send us home with our tagline, which is, may your glasses always be full, and may you keep on living the bourbon life.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. Our mission at the Bourbon Life is simple: to share our passion for all things bourbon with you every week. And we'd really love to hear your thoughts on how we're doing. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Bourbon Life. You can also contact us by email at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And you can always find us on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a moment, we'd love it if you would rate us and give us a review. So until next week, we hope your glass is always full and that you keep on living the bourbon life.